Good morning and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Dave Deacon. Temperatures are wobbling their way towards winter, which means drier conditions are coming, and with that, an increased chance of fire danger. Welcome to Oklahoma. SUNUP's Curtis Hare takes us to the Cross Timbers Research Station near Coyle, where we learn what producers can do to keep their land and livestock safe during fire season.
Well, the dormant season is here, and John, a lot of pastures are starting to look like this, and it's been really dry throughout the state. So what does that mean in regards to wildfire season?
So again, in a lot of the state received some pretty good rain during the summer. Sometimes in some of the areas, they were a little bit dry, so some of the growth's just a little variation and stuff here. But like you said, dormant season here, so it's going to dry all the fuels out, and then as we get fronts coming through with higher wind speeds, lower humidities and things that we typically see in the winter months, the fire danger can elevate pretty quickly. So one of the things we really need to be thinking about is managing that fuel for whatever reason.
What are some of the management practices that landowners can take to limit the effects of wildfire on their properties?
So the biggest concern should be areas around your home and around your infrastructure, such as barns and outbuildings and stuff that you have. That's where the biggest concern would be, because again, that's where the greatest loss can occur. So what you need to definitely be thinking about now, again, you always need to think about it now and not when the fire is just over the hill coming your way. You need to be thinking about it now. So again, now make sure you have stuff mowed down. Get it mowed down. In equipment yards and things like that, go ahead and mow down, or if you got areas that are fenced off, put some livestock in it and utilize it. Knock it down a little bit, get it down shorter. So again, to make that a whole lot simpler and easier to contain and control a fire, because again, if you look at this, trying to put a fire out in here is a lot more difficult than where we're standing at right here.
So there's things that they can do to the actual land, like mowing it down, try not to keep it as high as something like this, but there's also, they need to think about where they're stacking and putting their hay and things like that.
Exactly right. A lot of times we always store hay where it's easy access, easy to get to, but sometimes that's not the safest place to put it, because it may be next to an area, to a road that a lot of people may travel, and the opportunity for a spark or something to ignite something off the highway goes, and then you lose, a lot of your hay for the winter, things like that. Also again, think about spreading your hay out. The old adage of, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Same thing with your hay. Don't store it all in one spot. Spread it out. Go ahead and get it spread out, so that way if something does happen, you haven't lost a whole lot. Again, we got to remember that a lot of the insurance companies, they will cover damage from the hay, but also they will only cover up to a certain value. So if you put more than that value of what they'll cover in there, you're not going to recoup that. So
Gary McManus and Wes Lee, our Mesonet guys, they've been predicting a La Nina winter, more of a warmer, a drier winter. Does that make wildfire increases go up, or how's that?
Definitely makes it go up with the increase with warmer temperatures and drier conditions. Again, these fuels are going to be dry, and they're going to stay dry. Even if we do get some rain, most all this grasses, all this is 1 hour, what we call 1 hour time lag fuels. And what that means is it only takes about an hour for it to equilibrate back to the dry conditions.
And landowners can check with their local county extension offices for guidance on how to properly manage and protect their properties from wildfire.
You bet. Yeah, county extension office, we've got some fact sheets on wildfire and about how protecting property with that, and more information about wildfires here in Oklahoma within that.
All right, thanks, John. John Weir, fire ecologist here at Oklahoma State University. And for a link for the fact sheets that John talked about, go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Wes Lee here, and welcome to the Mesonet Weather Report. Oklahomans have experienced quite a roller coaster ride with temperatures over the past few weeks, but what hasn't changed is the moisture situation. As of Wednesday, it had been well over a month since the last significant rain had been received in the west. This map shows the days since at least a quarter inch of rain was recorded. As you would expect, what soil moisture we may have stored from the last good rains is now pretty much gone. On the 20th, the 4-inch percent plant available water map is dominated by red. The low numbers on the map are not good for our winter crops. A 4% plant available water, such as at Putnam, means that the soil at that site is only holding 4% of the maximum holding capacity of that particular soil type. Looking at the deeper 16-inch map, things are not a lot better. Most of the western sites are around the 10% plant available water level. While there is some possibility of increased rain chances next week, there is an almost definite certainty of some of the coldest air of the season. This forecast map shows a very high probability of cooler than normal temperatures. Most models are predicting a solid freeze for almost the entire state on Tuesday morning. Now here's Gary focusing on the drought increase since last week.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, I might have good news around the corner, but for the last couple of months it's been mostly bad. And that's given us a pretty bad drought monitor map in return. Let's take a look at that newest map and see what we have, and then take a look at some of the good news. Well, that drought map has gotten steadily worse over the last few weeks, and I'm afraid it's done the same this week. We now have a ton of moderate drought extending from west central Oklahoma up into north central Oklahoma, into Kay and Grant counties. And then we also have a ton of moderate drought extending down from northeast Oklahoma, and a broader area of abnormally dry conditions now starting to spread from south central Oklahoma into central Oklahoma as well. So a broad expansion of drought and abnormally dry conditions across the state, and I'm afraid if we don't get good rainfall, we could see that continue over the next few weeks. Let's take a look at the observed rainfall map from the Mesonet for the last 30 days, and there you see it across much of the western half of the state, goose eggs. We do have a little bit of moisture across the eastern half of the state, pockets a little bit more, but mostly less. And again, that's the reason we're seeing this bad drought continue. Take a look at that percent of normal rainfall map for the last 30 days, same period. Again, we see those 0% of normal figures across much of western Oklahoma, and it's really not good across all the state. We get about 50%, a little bit more across east Oklahoma, and that's about as good as it gets. Now for the good news, we do see for next week a really good dose of possible moisture, with the outlook from the Climate Prediction Center does show greatly increased odds of above normal precipitation, at least for that October 27th through 31st period. So maybe a good dose of moisture to end the month. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Turns out there's a lot of issues impacting the cattle and beef markets. And Derrell, let's start out with one of the big ones right now, the dry conditions and the growing drought.
Yeah, you know, certainly in the southern plains, obviously we're looking towards wheat pasture, and the door is closing pretty fast on that potential. We've got quite a bit of wheat planted and up, but it's not going to make pasture if we don't get some moisture pretty quick.
Feeder cattle prices have kind of weakened here lately. Is that drought related as well?
Well, that's part of it, certainly. Again, it's seasonally, it's the time of year when we look for those seasonally lows. The lack of wheat pasture will add to that. There's other things weighing on the markets as well. We've seen the fed cattle market back up a little bit. Box beef has weakened a little bit. The futures market has really weakened. So all of those things are kind of coming together to weigh on these markets right now.
Switching gears a little bit, the stockers are really banking on wheat pasture. Say we do get some rain, how does that impact the budgets moving forward?
Well, you know, again, the situation has changed quite a lot in the last 2 to 4 weeks. 6 weeks ago, my budgets looked very promising. And of course, we're basing this off of the future. So typically for winter grazing, we'd be looking at that March feeder cattle contract. We've taken about $15 off of that contract, at least at the point in time we are right now when we're filming this. And so it may bounce back. In fact, I expect it to bounce back some. But at the moment, my budgets don't look very attractive, even though though we've seen some weakening in the current cash prices, which would be our purchase prices, the budgets really have fallen apart in the last couple of weeks. So we're going to have to look at that pretty carefully going forward if we do get the chance for some winter grazing.
This is typically a time of year where producers are really looking at those cattle that they want to retain or move on to market. How do coal markets look right now?
Well, it's kind of the same situation to some extent. This is the time of year, of course, when we do cull a lot of cows. We see seasonally low prices anyway, but the dry conditions are aggravating that. We're probably seeing some additional culling with less flexibility on the part of some producers at least. So that's probably pressuring the market. Now, what that tends to do is it exaggerates this seasonal low. That may set us up for a very pronounced or at least a very strong spring price rebound in these cull cows.
And finally, we've wrapped up the third quarter of 2020, which is a goal in itself. But looking forward into 2021, how would you rate the cattle markets going into there?
Well, I think we're still somewhat optimistic possibility. We've been expecting some recovery in these markets in 2021. We're kind of carrying that. We've pulled back a little bit on our forecast for 2021 already, and I think that's the real threat right now. Obviously, we vastly changed our outlook for 2020 from the beginning of the year through the middle of the year and to this point. The same thing could happen again in 2021.
Oh boy, can't wait to see what 2021 brings. Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Derrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Last week on the Cow-Calf Corner, you remember we were talking about hay usage and how much hay we would expect a cow to consume if she has free access to big round bales 24/7, and how much she can actually use, including some of the wastage statistics that we included. That prompted a question from a producer in a drought-prone area where he's concerned about having enough hay and wanting to think about limiting the hay usage in his situation so that he can stretch that hay as long as possible. University of Minnesota looked at this with hay that was of really pretty good quality. It tested 9.5% crude protein, and that's an important fact to keep in mind. What they looked at was having cows having access to the hay 6 hours a day, 9 hours a day, or around the clock 24/7. What they found was by restricting the time that the cows had access to the hay, they could reduce the hay usage by 22%. And as they followed the cows, the difference in weight change was really minimal, and therefore the cows maintained body condition even though they had restricted access to the hay. University of Illinois had a study a few years later that looked at even better quality hay, and they actually studied access to the hay at 3 hours, 6 hours, 9, 24, and by even restricting it down to a shorter time frame, again, these cows got along fine with less hay usage. They did reduce the hay usage by a substantial amount, but again, the quality of the hay, I think, was the key. In this case, it tested 17% crude protein one year, and when they redid the study the following year, it was about 15% crude protein. That's like a low-quality alfalfa hay, and substantially better than most of our grass hays that we have available that we feed here in Oklahoma. So I think we want to understand that if we try to restrict the hay usage, the hay access for these cows with lower quality grass hay, yes, we might be able to reduce the hay disappearance a little bit, but we're going to have to make up the difference with some supplement in terms of some additional range cubes, some grain. We've got to make up the nutritional difference that we're pulling away from these cows by not letting them have access, complete access to those big round bales. Go to the SUNUP website. That's sunup.okstate.edu. There we're going to put up a link to a fact sheet that's done here at Oklahoma State University. All of these things are discussed in that fact sheet, so you might want to look through that. If you're concerned about the hay amount that you have available, the standing forage that's available this year, you may want to consider looking up that fact sheet and seeing what alternatives can fit your situation. We hope that this helps those of you that are struggling with having enough hay this winter. And we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
For the past few weeks, there's been a lot of news in the grain markets. So Kim, what's going on this week?
Well, we still had prices moving up. You look at wheat, we got 15, 16 cent price increases last week. Corn up 11 or 12 cents, soybeans up 25 cents. We're just continuing that, I would say, a gentle trend upward, and I think that's good.
So what's driving these prices?
Well, there's several things driving these prices. Probably the biggest thing on all the commodities is import demand. I've read several stories about the major importing countries buying ahead. There's one country that's got up to 17 months storage now, just in case the COVID comes in and disrupts the transportation system. You've got talk coming out of Russia. They keep talking about they're going to put in quotas. They talk about they're going to build Russian stocks for, again, to make sure they got plenty of wheat for flour. So you've got the importers. And now I must add on that Russian talk, I read one deal and I agree with it. You got to be careful with information come out of Russia. That some people think they may not have complete information right now, but the market's already looking at the 21 crop, and looks like the Ukraine, the Russian, and U.S. Hard red winter wheats acres are going to be down significantly in 21.
You know, here in the States, we've been, past couple times we've talked with you, it's been mostly about wheat, corn, and soybean, but what's going on with cotton?
Cotton started an uptrend last May. It's been a slow and gentle uptrend. It continues to go up. You look at those cotton prices, they went from 55 cents in May on the futures price to almost 72 cents. So you've got cotton prices coming up, and that's good for the cotton farmers.
So with all those prices and what's happening in Russia and around the world, really, should producers be nervous about prices?
I think so, because especially wheat, you've got a record world wheat crop, you've got record wheat stocks, you've got the importing countries buying ahead significant, maybe twice or more than they've done in past years. At some point in time, if we get this COVID under control, things stabilize a little bit, they're going to have a lot of wheat and they're not going to need to import wheat, and when they quit buying, that price is going down. Drought is driving the prices. Rain makes grain. Who can predict the weather? We get some rains in Russia, in the United States, hard red winter wheat area, Argentina at the right time, our prices will go down. However, if it stays dry and the COVID stays a problem, we could see our prices go higher. So yeah, I'd be nervous about prices. However, I wouldn't worry about it.
So with that, how's the agriculture economic situation?
Well, if you look at the economic situation for, say, wheat producers, the majority of Oklahoma's wheat is sold in June, July, and August. Therefore, the producers aren't getting to take advantage of these higher prices. Hopefully, they're going to have higher prices as we get into 21. But right now, it's doing some good, but not a lot of good for our economy.
All righty, Kim. Dr. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University. And now to Roger Sahs, who has information on the land leasing surveys.
Well, these surveys are we're gleaning some market information on the land rental market. And so with the time frame between now and November 10th, we would be very appreciative of the producers that have received these surveys to go ahead and fill them out and mail them back in. And you know, the more responses that we get, the better, the more reliable the market information that we have, that we can pass along into the hands of those producers that can really utilize it. And so, you know, for instance, you know, those producers that are working through a leasing negotiation discussion, you know, knowing what those basic representative market rates are and understanding those market conditions can be a great benefit for those landlord and tenants in establishing that fair and equitable lease agreement. So once again, the results that we get back from these land rental surveys can be a great benefit to a number of Oklahoma producers. And should there be any questions or concerns about that survey, feel free to contact myself, and my contact information is on the cover letter that came with those surveys. So go ahead and give me a holler and I'll get back with you.
Sometimes we plant wheat and it just doesn't grow, or we don't have enough to graze our cattle on. And Oklahoma State University Extension beef cattle specialist Dr. Paul Beck shows us an option for other forages like oats.
Our main focus is wheat pasture. We try to have cattle grazing on it through the cool season, and we use it as a cool season forage. That is our plan. We'll take them all through graze out, or we'll turn it into a bale of hay. We thought that we had our wheat found and that the germ test would be good, and it ended up not being, so we went with another route, and that was our quickest route was to go to oats.
Oats, you know, is a really good rescue crop. It's one of the fastest growing crops as far as the small grains that we have available to us. We can get a tremendous amount of growth in a short amount of time.
For us this year, it was a catch-up crop. We were a makeup crop. Very clearly, we did not do this the right way. We didn't plant it right. We didn't have our ground necessarily prepared, but the oats recovered from it. We were pushed in front of a rain, and we were afraid that we would be in a cycle where we might be 2 weeks where we wouldn't be able to get back into the field again, and then not have a chance to have that early grazing. So we got lucky. We had a tremendous amount of growth. They grew a lot faster than our wheat did, and we were able to stock these acres a lot heavier than we were our wheat acres.
Oats are the most palatable of our small grains. Cattle will, or other livestock will prefer those over rye and wheat and nearly everything else. They're really high in protein, very similar to wheat pasture, you know, 25 to 30% crude protein, and when it's just leaf, whenever it starts getting mature, you know, it'll get down into the lower 20s and upper teens. The problem is it's not winter hardy.
This has been trumped pretty hard with the wet weather that we've had since Christmas. It needs some time to recover. We've had some freeze damage from it that we wouldn't have had if we would have had wheat pasture. But this time, and I'm not going to say it's going to be every time, but this time the oats, we were able to stock considerably heavier. We stocked about 700 pounds of beef to the acre. We're not through the growing season yet. Clearly, the calves are catching the oats right now. If we can get to March, then we've essentially doubled our stocking rate. We've been looking at getting anywhere from 2.4 to 2.8 pound gains on cattle. We shipped some a week or so ago. We can't complain with how the production has been.
You know, when they were able to get cattle out, they were in more than double what we would see in a lot of wheat pasture situations. And you know, cattle gaining 2.5 to 3 pounds a day is really outstanding for that amount of livestock to have on the field.
My dad told me a long time ago, he said, dust wheat in, mud oats in. We've had a pretty muddy year, so it worked.
So a lot of livestock producers rely on water tanks for their livestock, and some of these tanks can become death traps for wildlife that inadvertently fall in when they're trying to get a drink. And almost all cases this is easily preventable, and not only is that a good practice for the wildlife, but it's also a good practice for the health of the livestock, because nobody wants to have to empty out a tank because it's full of bacteria from decomposing wildlife that inadvertently fell in there. And also just insects. You get huge insect loads that drown in some of these tanks. So it's a good practice to try to put some type of escape ramp in a tank that allows animals to get out. There's lots of different types of ramps that you can use. You can buy commercially available ramps, but you don't need to spend a lot of money. You can make something really cheap from materials you already have. Something like just a 2x4 or a fence post. Those are two easy ones to use. If you're using a 2x4, most animals can grip it already. They can grab onto the wood. You just need to make sure that it is securely fastened to the side of the tank. And it's really important with any of these escape ramps that they be positioned in such a way that an animal swimming around the edge, because that's usually what will happen, they'll swim around right on the perimeter, that they intercept it. And it needs to go all the way to the bottom of the tank, because if you have low water levels, it'll still be usable. And then you need to use some type of tie wire or something else to securely fasten it. Probably my favorite cheap, easy one is just a T-post. Everybody has these laying around. They last forever. They're not going to rot in the water. And a lot of animals can get out using the T-post, but if it's a small bird or something like that, it's going to need a little help. And you can wrap that T-post with some type of netting. Probably the best would be really small diameter metal poultry wire, and just wrap it really tightly and secure it with some type of tie wire so that it's all the way down the post. So if you'll follow these simple steps, not only will you prevent a lot of wildlife from drowning in your cattle water tanks, but you'll also have much cleaner tanks for your livestock.
Well, that does it for us this week on SUNUP. If there was something on the show that you'd like to learn more about, visit our website, sunup.okstate.edu. While you're there, check out our social media. I'm Dave Deacon. Remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at sunup.